Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Sketchy Talk podcast. Today we are talking to Ray Lago. Ray Lago has been a prolific artist in comic book fantasy industry for over 3 decades, creating covers and cards featuring Spider-Man, the X-Men, Superman, Vampirella, Predator, RoboCop, Star Wars, and many others. Painted story credits included Marvel's Open Space and Hellraiser series, Ivanhoe for Classics Illustrated, Ask Any Mermaid, in NBM's Skin Tight Orbit Volume 2, Harris Comics Vampirella 25th Anniversary Special, She Masquerade for Crusade, and the revived Little Annie Fanny feature for Playboy magazine. Ray is also well known for his Magic the Gathering gaming cards for Wizards of the Coast. Recently, Ray created paintings for Upper Deck's 22 Fleer Marvel Avengers trading card set, and a Garbage Pail Kids versus the Nazis cover illustration for Dynamite Comics. He continues to teach as an adjunct professor for the illustration department at NYC's Fashion Institute of Technology. Monographs of his work, Ray Lago, Heroes and Angels, and Ray Lago, Drawn to Beauty, are also available. Are they still available? Can they get them off your website?
No, you have to get them on eBay. I actually have a box of 100 that's being set aside one of these days by the guy who published it way back when for some sort of Kickstarter project as an extra.
Oh, nice.
But there are some other loose copies around. I could see if I can find the least blemished one to send you.
And you know, this podcast kind of mostly talks about sketching practice, and I'm sure that you have a very robust one, and working with students and that sort of thing, that's one of the most important building blocks to an illustration career. Is that something you agree with?
Well, yes, except like I have to confess that I don't sketch as much now as I did way back when. I sketched a lot more. And it depends a lot on what I'm teaching. For example, when I first started teaching at FIT, I taught anatomical life drawing. Of course, it doesn't exist anymore. And basically, we just drew from the model constantly, but we also did some heavy, rendering, I want to call them like you're copying from books and stuff, but you're basically analyzing the bones and the muscles and you're drawing them. There's very little sketching going on there. But from the model, there's tons of sketching. And with the illustration courses, the preliminary sketches are pretty much everything for assignment courses when you're doing an illustration assignment. But one course that I teach that's just about learning acrylic rendering techniques, there is no sketching happening because that's just about learning how to mix and match color with acrylic paint. And so everything is traced and then everything is done in a very methodical way to train your eyes to be able to see color and to match it. So it depends on the project. The course I teach this semester is illustration painting process 1. And for painting process 1, the initial thing, there's a lot of sketching with paint from the model. So they're literally different ways. I have them do different things. Some of them are very contradictory in order for them to, learn. So they paint, for example, a cookie cutter flat shape of what they see against a dark or white background, and then they draw into it with the paint. And other times they're doodling it out like gesture drawings and then building up, but with paint, no pencil. And now we're moving on to projects where right now we've gotten to the cowboy project, which I mentioned earlier in chatting. And they had to come up with their own ideas. I showed them a whole bunch of like magazine and paperback book kind of covers of Westerns and said, now you have to design your own with just that focuses on one model. We have one model who comes in dressed with all kinds of stuff. And they can do their own photography for it, but they have to base it on sketches that they had to pretty much make up out of their head. But again, it depends on the course. It varies. But sketching is really important. I do not do nearly enough of it. The sketching that I do mostly, unfortunately, because traveling should be when I go to and from the school is when I should sketch, but I'm always thinking about what I'm teaching. So I'm making notes and doing all that. So it doesn't happen. On the way home, I'm too tired. So basically, it doesn't happen there. So the sketching I do now mostly is when I have an assignment, I put on some quiet music so it's not distracting. I look at the job I'm supposed to do and I sit down and I doodle. And I doodle and doodle and doodle. And that is my favorite part of the thing. It's not the most impressive part of the thing. The most impressive part of the thing is the final painting. And that's the thing that I get paid for. And that's the thing that if I sell, I make the most money for. But I always tell my students that the preliminary drawing, that stage is the most fun.
Oh yeah, it's the most
And-
fun for me too. I'm thumbnailing a couple of books right now, and I'm always like, this is the most fun, and then the execution takes the longest, and it is the most impressive. But it definitely, like, the initial coming up of ideas. I mean, I always tell students that's your bread and butter. They're hiring you for your vision and coming up with the best ideas. And then, rendering takes a bit longer to be really good at. It takes years to be really good at the final stages of illustration. And so it's interesting to hear you say that. I'd like to hear a little bit about how you got into illustrating comics and covers. Did you go to school for illustration, or did you just sort of start showing your portfolio? I mean, that this was back in the days when you could go to a convention and show your portfolios, probably.
Yeah, no, the way it worked for me was comics was more like my first love. Comic books, comic
Mm-hmm.
strips, that was my first love, absolutely. But there, in grammar school, of course, there really wasn't anything for you to learn. Even though I was known that I like to draw.
Mm-hmm.
So I was one
Mm-hmm.
of the few people, and that's always the way it is. You're one of the few people in grammar
Mm-hmm.
school that like to draw. They asked you to do art for the bulletin board, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cut out paper things, silly. And then in high school, I went to an excellent high school, St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, great college preparatory high school that had no art program.
Oh,
So
really?
basically, I learned Latin, ancient Greek, calculus back before it was probably taught to 8-year-olds now, but back then you didn't have calculus in high school. So it was a great school, terrific school, no art program. So, but I liked it, and I hadn't stopped collecting comic books. I loved them. I used to copy from them, whatever, and I thought I'd like to try studying art. And I couldn't get in. I did some samples, which were terrible. I couldn't get in as an art major, like pretty much anywhere. So I just instead, I went to Kane University in Union, New Jersey, which accepted me, a state college. And general art was the major or something, not visual communications, which is sort of like art and design that
Mm-hmm.
encompasses
Mm-hmm.
illustration and graphic design. Um, because I was going to go to Syracuse, but I didn't accept. I got accepted, but not as an art major. I had to reapply, and I was like, I didn't want to wait half a year. So I went to college instead of New York State. I'm from New Jersey anyway. I went to Kane, and I enjoyed Kane. I loved it. And after 1 year there, I wasn't going to bother to reapply at another school or something like
Oh,
that.
yes.
I was ready. I was already planted there. But after one semester of art classes, which was simply, what was it? I actually had life drawing because the regular drawing was full. The guy allowed me, the professor Carl Berger, who recently passed away, Professor Carl Berger. Um, he allowed me to join, and so I was drawing from the nude model. I'm like 18, 19 years old, and that's the first time I can. These days, might be different for these kids today, but I've never seen a model just take her clothes off and stand in front. So I was like, okay, and then you just start drawing. I don't know what
Uh-huh.
I expected, but it was still a little, startling for me. Um, After one semester, that course, and I think it might have been a preliminary painting class. I'm not sure, and I knew nothing about painting. Um, I just loved it, and I realized at the end of that semester that it didn't even make a difference whether I made a living at it. That I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to do this. I mean, and that's coming from a very academic background in my high school. I was like, no, I just decided I'm going to do it. Just going to go for it. So 5 years later, I graduated from college. Because I took the minimum number of courses in order to reduce the workload so I could become better as an artist. I wasn't trying
Mm-hmm.
to get out of this, so I just took out an extra loan, stayed longer. Um, but I started freelancing while I was in college as an illustrator. I
Oh,
didn't,
nice.
I didn't get too many clients, but I got a few. I made some money, and I learned a lot of stuff. Created a few bad pieces of art, and got paid for it. And then when I graduated, I continued to do it. I rented a studio with some friends who were art majors, wanted to be illustrators, and we all started going out there with our portfolios, trying to get illustration assignments. Varied any kind of clients we could find out about. We looked at everything. Like we looked at any kind of information in any magazine, in any book, trying to figure out who's publishing what. Do either any of us do that kind of work, and might they hire us? And we literally, schlepped our portfolios into Manhattan, And I mean, the amount of time going back and forth is crazy. I think it was a great experience in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to call it suffering because that, there's people in the world who really suffer. But we did go out literally in the rain and in the snow and all the rest
Mm-hmm.
of it to drop off portfolios, then pick them up and never got a job from it.
Really?
Many times. But now and then you lucked out and something came through and you got a job. But sometimes you'd meet with a person 2 or 3 times and the job still never materialized. So there's a lot of not getting paid for your time. But then again, you're the one who's there like hat in hand begging for work. So that's just part of it. Um, Now, comics was always something I loved, but I wasn't fast enough
Mm-hmm.
to do any kind of monthly comic book at all. Not with any quality, not anything I'd sign my name to. Yeah, I had enough of an ego that I didn't want to, if they would hire me, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't last because the work just wouldn't be good enough.
Yeah.
What happened was Marvel, what was it? Oh, Marvel started publishing Epic Magazine, which was like heavy metal.
I remember that magazine. It was great.
And I had started to develop my painting skills. And I thought, I think that maybe I could do something painted like storytelling samples, and maybe I could I saw stuff was being pitched. Like maybe I'd write a little short story,
Mm-hmm.
paint it, and then pitch it. Maybe they publish it. So I started to think about that, and then they stopped publishing Epic Magazine, and I was like,
Oh.
ah, rats, forget about that. And then they started publishing other projects like Kent Williams's Blood and John J. Muth's Moonshadow.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met George Pratt, who was doing Enemy Ace for DC. And I thought, okay, exciting things are happening. I should work on some samples. And then a friend of mine who had been published by Blackthorn Comics, his name is Mark Wayne Harris, he's a writer for Blackthorn Comics. Um, he had a conversation with Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil had contacted him. He had met him once. Denny O'Neil from DC Comics, Batman editor, famed Batman editor and writer, um, for a lunch meeting. So he couldn't believe his luck. He went and met with him, and he was basically asked to write a script for like a miniseries or something. Now, it never went anywhere, but he asked me, would I be interested in doing some samples to pitch so that it might be a deluxe project, which paint and all that. I'm like, I think he's crazy. I think his script should, but I'll do it. You bet. Something to put in front of Danny O'Neil. So I did, and I showed the stuff. Danny O'Neil said some nice things. It never went anywhere. I didn't get hired by DC at the time, but I showed those samples to Marvel. They said some nice things. They didn't have anything for me, but they said keep in touch. And then another time, this is the way these things always work. Mark Wayne was doing something for Innovation Comics, David Campiti's company, and I knew of them a little bit. And so they wanted to have me do something the following spring, but they didn't have it yet. But they absolutely wanted me to do something. I'd sent them some color copies being new technology
I
at the
remember
time.
those, yes.
It was like $5 a copy or something, I forget. And I sent them off, and they really liked them. And they were just this Batman thing wasn't even much. It was terrible. It was just a few intro pages, very thin, very pale, very had no authority to the stuff. But anyway, it got my foot in the door, and they were coming to Jersey, to Morristown, for some trade show. And Mark Wayne was going to meet with them. I had a studio down in Soho at the time, and he wanted me to meet him in Newark. He'd pick me up, we'd go to Morristown, and I'd meet them. So I was like, oh, sure, just give me a call in the morning, make sure I'm up, and we'll time it in the morning. Because, we didn't have a table, we're just going to show up and go
Yeah.
in. And so we didn't have to be there at any particular time. So anyway, he calls me and he goes, you bring your portfolio, right? I'm like, no, they've seen my work. I don't need to bring my portfolio. No, bring your stuff. They'd like to see the original. I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. That feels weird. And they go, all right, all right. So I packed them. Thank God I did, because I brought them. And Paul Curtis, I keep dropping names. Paul Curtis was like assistant editor there. Um, I met everybody there, and it was nice. We had a nice time. And Paul Curtis says to me, he says, "Don't look now, but Marvel's walking by." And I'm like, "Marvel?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, you really should show your work to Carol Kalish." And I was like, "She's head of this and that and whatever." Of course, I never heard of her, but she was instrumental in creating the direct market for comics. So
Oh,
she was like a
interesting.
very
Yeah.
important person in really the growth of the industry. Very instrumental. But I had no idea. And I was like, I was like, Paul, no, I came to see you guys. I don't, it feels weird. I don't really want. So Carol, Paul goes, hey, Carol. And Carol goes, oh, hi, Paul, keeps walking. And Paul says, Carol, come back. I want to show you some work. And
Oh, that's awesome.
he showed her my work. She looked at me and said, you like science fiction? And I said, yeah, I like science fiction. She gave me her business card, told her to call her next week. I did. I met with Kurt Busiek, of Astro City fame now, but he was an editor at Marvel launching this science fiction line called Open Space. So I
Uh-huh.
met with Kurt, and he gave me my first comic book project. So it
Wow.
happened like that. Dum, 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 dum. Now
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I would never have broken into comics some other time, but the way it happened was Mark Wayne Harris telling me to bring my stuff, and then Paul Curtis shoving my stuff in front of Carol.
Oh, that's
Like
awesome.
I was barely part of it. Those two friends of mine are the ones who shoved my work. And then Marvel gave me some open space stuff, and they gave me Hellraiser stuff, and they gave me Hook stuff from the various editors. And then it led to trading cards and covers and Dark Horse and Crusade Comics and Harris Comics with Vampirella and every other thing. So I went from an illustrator who, well, even as a freelancer, I used to do, and I think it's in there in my bio. I worked in television for a while by accident. I wound up becoming technically called a graphic design engineer, but it's a paint box artist, and a paint
Oh,
box was
huh.
sort of like a Mac, but before its time.
I
And
remember
so
those. Yeah.
I worked on and off on those for several years, and it was a really good source of income. And
Uh-huh.
compared to illustration, it was pretty damn easy if you're an illustrator, that is.
Yes, yeah.
So it was easy money and nice environment, nice people to work with, reliable pay. But once I started work, I had to leave. I actually had taken on a full-time position, which is rare for me, because they offered it to me and the freelance was going to go away. So I said yes. But 5 months later, I got the job from Marvel. And I basically had to tell the guy that I was leaving this great paying job to work on a comic book, which made me feel 8 years old. But I did it. And the guy understood. He was a nice guy. And he still gave me a little freelance work here and there
Oh, good.
when they needed it. So we left on good terms. But I left a high paying job to, make a lot less money doing comic books because it's something I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but it went from needing to do paint box work occasionally to fill in the gaps in the illustration work, to like having more work than I could handle, you
Mm-hmm.
know, as an illustrator in comics and fantasy. I mean, the '90s were insane. I mean, they're wonderful, but they were insane. Back to back deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
It got stressful at a certain point because you think you can time everything, but it's really hard.
Oh no, I
Especially
understand.
wow, wow, it was just a. But the '90s were like an explosion, and of course that
Mm-hmm.
was followed by an implosion, later
Mm-hmm.
on. But that explosion was amazing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad I was there for that because it was just amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's it's no, I so did you said you were doing this paint box work. Did you do editorial illustration at all too? Did you do much or was that
The work that I got as an illustrator, a lot of it was just piecemeal stuff. I would get like these odd jobs. I was doing some
mm-hmm.
spot illustrations for Sylvia Porter Financial Magazine. I did little illustrations for Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Monthly. I did some work, and a lot of this was black and white. Some was color, more
Mm-hmm.
black and white than color, because that's really the best work I did at a certain point was black and white.
Mm-hmm.
I did a whole bunch of illustrations for a couple of Reader's Digest music books, literally the books you put on a piano with the
Oh
music and
yes,
have illustrations.
I think I remember seeing those too. Those Reader's Digest books were everywhere. Everybody had them.
I posted some of it out like last year, the year before on my Facebook page. And one of my friends who was teaching at FIT, who's a terrific artist himself, said he's a musician. And he was like, "Oh my God, I had those books."
Oh yeah,
He's
that's
like,
really cool.
"So you drew those, which is really cool. Yeah.
So you just kind of ended up and I totally understand the whole. I mean, there's when you especially when you have a lot of stuff stacked up, there's sort of an unpredictability uh to like I always call it deadline Jenga. You kind of push at the different
Oh
blocks and
yeah.
hope that they don't all fall over.
Oh, no, that's a good word for it. It was, if one project took too long, especially
Hmm.
storytelling. See, the
Yes.
trading card pieces, even cover pieces, you put in a few, overnights, and you can get something done. With comics, a few overnights is it's still just the tip of the iceberg. You still have so much work ahead of you with storytelling. It's my favorite thing, but it's
It
just
and every
so much.
project's so different. It's like that with picture books too. I mean, it's even after painting over 60 of them, it's like I don't, some paintings go really fast, some don't. And if it's complicated, if there's lots of plants and people and animals, it just
Mhm.
takes a long time.
Well,
Uh,
a writer will, describe a scene, and
mm-hmm,
then you've got to illustrate it. And if the scene involves, I joke about this, but a friend of mine, there was a time when I moved to Jersey, like 14 years ago, and I didn't have the, because I lived in New York for a while, for almost a decade.
mm-hmm,
And then when I moved to Jersey, get back to Jersey, I thought, but once I settled in, tried to figure, was I still going to continue to teach? Because at the time, I didn't think I would want to commute. I started teaching while I lived in Manhattan. I thought that once I'm commuting, will I still want to do it because of the time it takes to go back and forth?
mm-hmm,
After I got used to it, I thought, well, you're kind of settled now. Maybe you should do some pencil samples and just do
mm-hmm,
some penciling for comics, since it's still my
mm-hmm,
favorite thing. So I started to do some stuff and I started to show it around, but my worry was, and I got, I'm not gonna say interest, but I had the attention of a few people. But the thing was, I'd have to do a trial script, just like a
mm-hmm,
rookie, because it's about the speed, not about the quality. It's about the speed.
mm-hmm,
And so I was thinking, okay, let me wait till I have the time to devote to it, because that's, because otherwise I can't do it, especially with school. I can't
yes,
do it.
yes.
Um, and a friend of mine who's a comic book artist gets a script that's my horror show. Again, a writer takes seconds to write this, but imagine illustrating Times Square underwater. Okay, and he describes them like, and all I could think of was, I don't know who the writer was, but I'm just thinking like, what a nightmare. Yeah, it took seconds for that writer to put it down. Now the artist has got to research it and put it together and draw the whole. And all I thought, okay, maybe I don't want to, push this, because that's what I'll get. I'll get like 1,000,001 people, like in a stadium, as two behemoths battle and spaceships are soaring around. It's like, my God, that's like a week or two of drawing. So I thought, maybe not. But I still would like to do some sort of comic book stuff, but it would have to be something created by myself, basically,
Mm-hmm,
because then I would draw what I want to draw rather than what someone writes for me to draw, so.
mm-hmm.
And so I'd select the shots rather than following a script, because that's the nightmare, is what is selected
Exactly.
for you to illustrate,
Well, it seems like, as you continue in your career, I know I kind of want to do more of my own intellectual property
Mhm.
than doing stuff for other people.
Yeah.
And so that's, like the book on sketching and all that.
Mhm.
That's just trying to do more of my own initiated projects. And, it's hard at first to kind of get everything, from a project management standpoint into place.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now,
there's
there's
a
a
lot of
bunch of
hats.
things. Well, that friend of mine, Mark Wayne Harris, and I actually launched a Kickstarter campaign for a project many years ago. But then
Hmm.
when and it got just enough funding to do it, but then I couldn't get to illustration, so he saw it coming. So it wasn't too many months. He just decided, okay, we're not keeping the schedule. I'm just going to refund everybody. He didn't even ask me. He just refunded everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, okay. So that's a back burner project that I'd still like to do, but I've already
Mhm.
changed the way I'd want to do it. Like, I wouldn't want to do it in its original format. I'd actually want to do it more like a graphic novel, with a lot
Hmm.
more art. It was actually a novelette with spot illustrations. I'd actually like to do it where it's more, they're panels,
Hmm.
So that's something, and I've done layouts for the whole thing. That's not the problem.
Oh,
The
then you
problem
should
is
do it one day.
it's finding the time to do
Exactly.
the finished work. It's hard, but I have a whole lot. I have many things like that I'd like to do. It's one of the reasons that I follow people such as yourself who are doing the things. By the way, on Patreon, I have a few
Oh,
people.
thanks.
I follow a bunch of people on Patreon who are doing their own thing. I like
Hmm.
to look and learn. You know, I
Hmm.
do like your. I showed it to my students, though. I teach acrylic, so it's not useful. But I showed them your palette ring, your mini palette
Oh, yes,
ring that
yes.
I got in the mail. I've showed it to a couple of for a couple semesters to students, but unfortunately, I'm not teaching watercolor, so
Uh-huh.
it's not like I can use it in class. But I
Uh-huh.
think it's a marvelous little thing. I think it's a great
Oh yeah,
creation.
we had, and that's the product. My background actually is in product design, and my husband is an engineer, and so I did a sketch of what it should be, and then he figured out all of the how he figures out how you manufacture things, and it is a really I've been looking at stuff that when you're sketching on site, especially like museums and stuff, they don't like you to bring things like paint and water
Mhm.
into there.
Mhm.
And this is something that's very covert. Now, a lot of places are taking your bags when you bring them in to the
Right.
museums because they mostly because people have been attacking the art,
Yeah.
like in Europe. where you heard about the people throwing tomato juice on the paintings and stuff. So now they're really restricting what you take into those places. And so I've got like this really tiny kit now with my little tiny ring palette and all that stuff. So it really is helpful. So you were talking about how you got into comics. How did you eventually get into teaching? Because I, and what do you love about teaching? I mean, I find it really interesting to interact. I mean, I never had kids or anything, and it's great to kind of keep a idea of how kids are. It kind of gives you hope for the future because there's so many talented kids, and it's really great watching them improve through each semester. But how did you get into it?
Well, I was when I let's see, when I was in high school, we had some programs where we tutored grammar
Mm-hmm.
school kids who were coming into our high school through a certain program. And then I'd work in the summers with one of those programs again as an art teacher. Shortly after graduating college, I was hired by my old high school, that really good high school that had no art program, to be their art teacher. That lasted a year. Then they canceled the program completely,
Oh.
um, which was weird to me because when I was hired, they said they want to keep this program alive. And I went to a Jesuit high school.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
priest who taught it was off somewhere, like foreign country or something. And
Mm-hmm.
so they hired me to keep it going. Then they canceled it after a year. I'm like, huh? What? Well, it made no sense to me. And Jesuits usually make a lot of sense. So that was very
Mm-hmm.
odd. I'll never know what was going on there. But they were also canceling, I think, ancient Greek and a whole bunch of like
Hmm.
things, which were like uniquely theirs. So who knows? Um, so I'd always done a bit of teaching. Teachers, old teachers of mine would have me come and do guest lectures back at my
Mm-hmm.
college and other places. One teacher of mine had to come to SVA for like a demo and lecture. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was always something I did here and there. Only one full year as a high school instructor. The other things were all like workshops, weekends, little bits here and there where I was just invited and paid. But 'cause it was a job. I mean, as much as I enjoy teaching, it's a job.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And
I'm not doing it for no pay. Um, because it's just a lot of work. When the FIT thing happened, Dave DeVries is a terrific fantasy and comic book artist himself.
mm-hmm.
Was working at FIT, and I was living in Manhattan at the time. My bills were kind of high. He said, you should teach at FIT. They're always looking for people, and it would be a nice steady thing for you in addition to the illustration work, which wasn't always steady, and the comic book work, which always wasn't steady. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. No, no, no. And then a few months later, I had a conversation with an old instructor of mine from Kane University. And he said, because I was thinking I might have to leave my apartment because it's expensive. And looking for an apartment as a freelancer is tough
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have steady income. When I got my New York apartment when I left Jersey in 2000, what helped me was I was working for Playboy. And the owner, this millionaire who owns these buildings, was a fan of Playboy and a fan of
Oh, that's nice.
Little Annie Fanny that I was working on. You're going to laugh at this because I was going through, and this is not to bring up any horrible memories or anything, but I was going through a divorce, and that's why I was moving. And so I was pretty down. I was unhappy person, very unhappy. And when when I was accepted, because getting accepted, I was told by several realtors that because I'm a freelancer, that I'm not like someone else is competing with me for an apartment. I got a really good chance of
Uh-huh.
losing. So when I was accepted for the apartment, the realtor called me and he says they have an unusual a thing they're asking, and I said what? Because I was pretty happy that I was accepted. Yeah, I was happy that I was giving them a ton of money to take an apartment in Manhattan. That's the way they got you in Manhattan, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Um,
totally.
so they said they want to know if you wouldn't mind autographing the book and my art book Heroes and Angels and the Little Annie Fanny sample that you included. If I wouldn't mind
Oh,
autographing them, I'm like, no, I'll be happy to autograph them. So when I went in to sign the lease, I also autographed my book for them and the Little Annie Fanny sample for them.
wow.
So that made me feel really good. And that was at a good time to make me feel good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was that's kind of a kick.
Uh-huh.
That's it's a very again, being an artist is a very strange thing.
It
You know,
really is. That's
I think I'm probably the only one who ever autographed stuff that was submitted as part of an application, for an apartment.
that's a great story. Did you ever get to meet Harvey Kurtzman?
No, I never got to meet him. It would have been an honor to meet him. I didn't meet Will Elder at San Diego one time, but I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. Another terrific artist from EC was very protective of him, trying to get him to leave. There was a panel of people from EC there, and I wanted to milk Will Elder for some information about it because I was currently doing it for Playboy. So I
Mm-hmm.
got to chat with him, but it was very brief, not enough time at all, at all.
Mm-hmm.
I did hear from Harvey Kurtzman's widow, Adele. She asked me if I could do like an Annie Fanny thing for a charity auction that she and her
Oh,
husband
nice.
contribute
Yeah.
to. So I whipped up a watercolor Little Annie Fanny and sent it to them, and they auctioned it off. So, but
Uh-huh.
I did meet people like Jack Davis and Arnold Roth who did it, especially Jack Davis, who did additional work on Annie Fanny.
Oh, really? I
And
didn't know Jack Davis had done some work on that.
oh, he did some really great stuff in the early
Mm-hmm.
days of, well, not the first few years, but I consider the prime years. He did some stuff, and Jack Davis is probably the fastest gun in the West. And yet he'd said to me with his southern drawl, like, I never painted so fast in my life, working for Kurtzman and Elder.
Wow.
And he told me a few stories. So I milked these guys. I used to go to the National Cartoonist get-togethers, the Reuben Awards,
Oh, yes,
and
yes. Are you still
that's
involved with
really,
them?
nah, not for many, many years. My
Mm-hmm.
wife was cartoon editor, so for at the time for United Feature Syndicate. No
Mm-hmm.
longer there, but she was there. She was Charles Schultz's last editor, actually.
Oh, really?
So in that time, yeah, one time he passed away. Um, and that was amazing, meeting people like Charles and Jeannie Schultz and the other cartoonists that I met through the organization and through my wife was just amazing. So yeah, I mean, it's a little surreal, to be honest with you. It is,
Mm-hmm.
you grow up. I don't know about you, but I grew up reading those little paperbacks of Snoopy and
I
Charlie
did. Yeah,
Brown.
my grandparents had a bunch of them, and I used to read them.
Oh, I love them. I used to crack up, reread them. I love them. They were just brilliant. And
Mm-hmm.
then, fast forward a whole bunch of years, my wife is driving a car. I'm sitting next to her, and behind us in the back seat are Charles and Jeannie Schultz, and we're
Oh,
going from
wow.
another. And that's like, okay, what Twilight episode is this? This is the Twilight Zone. This is not real.
That's really
So,
cool. Yeah, I mean, there's living in Ohio, we're close to the Billy Ireland Museum, which uh uh the Schultz's Charles Schultz's widow donated millions to, I think. It's a great cartoon museum.
yeah.
And they've had some really great shows like Mad Magazine artists, and um they own most of Bill Watterson's collection, and
Wow.
it's really
Yeah,
great to go up and see their
Jeannie's
shows.
amazing. One time after the Rubens, I think it was the Rubens, the last Rubens at the World Trade Center, a year
Wow.
or so before it came down. Um, I After the awards, we were up in Schultz's room with a few other cartoonists, Patrick
Hmm.
McDonald and his wife, who does Mutts, another artist. God, I can't think of his name. Really, a really brilliant art. He did a thing called Top of the World, which was a
Hmm.
couple of like gangster guys or prisoners who
Hmm.
escape all the time. Can't remember his name. He's a terrific artist and his wife. So we're hanging out up there, and they're kind of like saying, "Oh, this person, that person should have gotten an award, whatever." And Jeannie Schultz, again, I love her. She went over to the mini bar, and she's, I don't remember her age, but she's on her knees there pulling stuff out of the mini bar, saying, "Does anyone want this? Does anyone want this?" And I want to like say, you're a multimillionaire. You should not be on your knees pulling stuff out of there.
That's
Don't you have an
hilarious.
assistant to do this stuff? But that's not the way they were.
Uh-huh.
They're like, and Jeannie still is. Just wonderful, nice people.
That's a great anecdote. What do
Mhm.
you think about the way things are changing? I mean, it seems like that's one industry that's changing a lot, is illustration, and
Yeah,
as
no, it's
and teaching
actually
future
it is.
illustrators.
Yeah, with teaching illustration, I teach foundational classes for the
Hmm.
most part. I do teach a continuing ed class that doesn't always run. It didn't run this semester, called Fantasy and Science Fiction, and that's my favorite class to teach. It's just an
Oh,
assignment.
yes. Uh-huh.
It's an assignment class, 3 different assignments, and But for foundational teaching, the basic drawing and painting, which is what I mostly teach, um, it doesn't change anything for me because I'm teaching foundational skills, and
Mm-hmm.
they can take that and do whatever they want with it. They can,
Mm-hmm.
start doing gallery work, Etsy stores, fine art,
Mm-hmm.
illustration, anything they want. Do their own world. When it comes to the digital stuff, I allowed in one project in the fantasy science fiction class, the final project, which is a gaming card assignment. But and the other stuff, it's all traditional. Um, the in the So for education, it doesn't change much for me. It's going to change
Mm-hmm.
more for the people who teach upper division, the junior and senior years, where it's more about them developing. It's for the BFA, and that's
Yes.
where they're developing their portfolios,
Mm-hmm.
not just learning basics, which is what I'm teaching. Doesn't affect me. The AI thing, of course, is incredibly dangerous for all kinds of things, not just our field,
Mm-hmm.
but like every field. And for honesty, basically,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell a program to write your term paper for you, do
Yes.
the homework
Yes.
for you, all that stuff. That is, you know, I mean, not that haven't fully embraced the idiot culture, but I think we'll be completely overwhelmed by it if people
Mm-hmm.
don't learn math, don't learn to write,
Mm-hmm.
and just think it's okay to lie, about
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. So it's already bad enough that we do portfolio reviews, e-portfolios online,
Mm-hmm.
called Slide Room, and when the stuff is digital, first of all, we never know if the work is really theirs anyway. But if it's digital, then you don't know if they did it or they just grabbed it from somewhere. How would we know?
Mm-hmm.
So we've definitely had students come in with fraudulent portfolios that we
Oh,
know they're
wow.
fraudulent. Well, because we know their work stinks afterwards. They come into school and they can't do what their portfolios look like.
Mm-hmm.
If I show you one particular drawing from one particular student, a full semester perspective drawing, and I showed you what the final drawing looked like, you would say it's a kid's drawing. It's a
Mm-hmm.
child's drawing. How did this person even get in? What did their portfolio look like? So it's bad enough that there's a lot of that. Now with AI, it's even worse. And again, I think AI. I was hearing someone, I think even on yesterday or maybe today, scientists saying that for a lot of AI is going to be incredibly useful for a lot of things, and it may supercharge the future for us. It may like warp drive us into the future in certain areas in science. And I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But in day-to-day life for your average person, it could spell all kinds of bad things. And again, mostly I see it as fraud. As far as competition is concerned, well, you know, I kind of saw the writing on the wall with that with the digital stuff anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
but of course it takes it to a whole nother level where the person's just typing in prompts. That's
Mm-hmm.
and then there's
Yeah,
this
that's
amazing piece created. Yeah.
I mean, I think there will always be, I mean, I think that's why I emphasize so much ideas and sketching and coming up with good compositions. And because I don't think that will ever be go away. Like being able, your ideas are the most important thing. And the rendering, obviously, and the finish also, I mean, are things that take longer to develop, but having that nugget of the idea first and be able to conceptually talk about it, I think is one of the most important skills that we have, as humans and I think that, I don't think that it's going to get rid of illustration. I mean, I think that there's always been from when I started, people were saying, oh, photography, is going to take, there was a time when they thought photography was going to take over illustration. They thought stock art was going to take over illustration. I think there's always going to be a call for types of illustration.
Both of those things had great impact in their
Yes.
day, but
Hmm.
it didn't stop another wave of coming where
Exactly.
illustration became popular. One of the thing is there's always going to be a desire for physical art,
I
and
think
there's
so too.
definitely digital's faster for so many things, like obviously movie concept art and gaming
Hmm.
and anime. That stuff is 99% digital, and for lots of great reasons. And the work looks super impressive. So you can't argue with it. Again, I teach these basic foundational skills, and I guess I would liken it to even with AI, you can compose a wonderful piece of music. Can you play piano? In other words,
Exactly.
yeah, that was a skill. Can you play guitar? Wouldn't you want to, if you're a musician, a composer, wouldn't you want to know how to play the instruments just for yourself and for live performances or anything if you actually become a performer? So I liken it to that. Like it's about developing your own personal artistic skills.
Hmm.
And whatever you wind up doing for a living, for example, if you basically art direct illustration using AI, based on your experience as with your foundational skills, fine, as long as you're not lying about it and as long as you're not stealing stuff from, like other artists. And
Hmm.
that's where the problem is,
Well, that's what
theft.
most of it is right now, is just stealing from other artists. I
Mhm,
mean, I think that there's something to be said for, and that's kind of how I got in urban sketching, is joy of drawing, because I loved to draw.
mhm,
And actually getting into urban sketching and sketchbooks actually really is a good antidote to burnout, because a lot of times, a lot of the projects I work on, and similar with you too, they take a long time to finish and render, and I like doing that, but I also like keeping a sketchbook where it's not for a client, it's just whatever I feel like doing at the time. And that kind of is a good antidote when I'm feeling rebellious. You know how it is when you're finishing a project and like everything looks better to do than
mhm.
what you have to
Well,
finish.
you asked before about, like teaching, and one of the things when I first was asked to come teach a class, and it was
Hmm.
funny because I had this discussion with old instructor at King University, and since I was looking to move out of my apartment, he said, "Well, he says, I understand what you mean as far as getting another apartment. It's going to be a little tough, but if you put down like adjunct instructor, like for a college, they don't know what that is. So, because he offered to get me some classes to teach my old university,
Uh-huh.
and I told him I'd let him know I didn't want to commute all the way to Jersey and living in
Yes.
Manhattan. So I called up Dave DeVries and I left a message for him on his answer machine. I said, look, I thought about it. Next time they're looking for someone, just throw my hat in the ring.
Hmm.
And so 2 weeks later, I get a call and they asked me to come in. I met with the chairperson and I started teaching anatomy the next day.
Wow.
Well, like the next day. So it was like, okay. But anyway, the thing about it was right from the start, I loved the environment. I
Yes.
hadn't really been on campus in a while. And I love it's fall semester, freshman year. Everyone smiles, everyone's enthusiastic,
That's so
everyone wants
cool.
to be there. Everyone wants to draw better, learn how to paint, all of it. It is a very positive, creative environment. So, and not that I was bored being in my apartment in Manhattan. I had work to do, I was always busy, but taking that break and going into that positively charged environment felt good.
It
And so I
revitalized
still,
you. Yeah.
yeah, the only thing I hate is the commute now.
Yes.
But when I'm on campus, it's a great environment, great experience, a lot to do setting up a room. And if I'm doing with costumes and models, a lot of work. But the actual experience of teaching is very positive. The students are really interesting. Really, they just, if you don't like people, you shouldn't be teaching. If you don't like, I'll joke that I don't like kids, but really, these are 18, 19, 20-year olds, and they want to be artists. So they want to join the club. And
Yeah.
so there's something about it that's very attractive. And so I enjoy being around them. And I still remember being their age. And there
Hmm.
is that factor. Remember, so when they're saying something I know is not true, or when they're trying to pull, it's like, I was there. I remember,
You're it seems like a nice school. I went to see the senior show. My brother lives in New York City, and I remember being pretty impressed by it. And they actually even had a toy design major, which is
Mm,
unusual. But the last interview I did with Virginia Hine, I don't know if you listened to that yet, but she has taught at Otis for years and they have a toy major design. She worked at Mattel
mm,
and stuff. And it was kind of interesting. I wasn't sure how I felt about a major that's that specific. It's kind of
mm.
cool, but it kind of pigeonholes you also into like one kind of
Well,
product.
we have a lot of our students who only go for the AAS for our associates program don't continue to the BFA for illustration. They go into toy design, animation
Interesting.
design. They
Hmm.
go into other areas where they used the illustration skills. One of them is toy design. A whole bunch of my
Mm-hmm.
students have gone into toy design, but they spend 2 years doing illustration, then they go into 2 years of toy design. And then they go off to hopefully work for Mattel or some other company
Or
like that. We
well,
don't know.
we're pretty close to Hasbro up there, so
Mhm.
probably a lot of them go there. I mean, but it was interesting because I didn't think of it as a major till mine was more of a general product design major when I went to school. And one thing when you were talking about your schooling, I think one thing that helps as an illustrator is having a background in how to do research and how to study things. Because a lot of times we're asked to illustrate stuff that we don't know that much about.
Mhm.
And that's where that's where all those other skills where you're talking about the AI writing your papers and not learning how to write, like being able to study is probably one of our biggest abilities too, because
Mhm.
learning backgrounds in history and stuff like that make you much better as an illustrator.
Oh yeah, no, I love that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Students probably hate that aspect of it, but I always liked learning about stuff. And sometimes you learn more about the subject than the people that hire you. When the I did, and probably it's probably not included in my bio, but I don't know if I included Marwi. I penciled and did some inks on a graphic novel called Marwi. It's an African
Mm-hmm.
folktale. That was the last comic book project I did a while ago now. It was like when I was still in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe it's been that long. I still haven't done another comic book project of any kind. I don't mind not doing it regularly, but I still like the idea of occasionally,
Mm-hmm.
putting my hand in there. So I need to put my hand back in there sometime soon. Um, and I wound up looking up online because we have the internet. Before pre-internet, research was so much more time consuming,
Oh
much more.
yes.
Whatever number of hours you may spend on a computer researching something, that doesn't compare to going to libraries and bookstores and everything else
Mm-hmm.
trying to find these things out and reading through everything. But anyway, the Marwi story, this African folktale, I saw like three different scripts on it before they finally finalized something. The company is called Learner Books. They're a children's book
Mm-hmm.
publisher, and they did a graphic novel line, and this is the one that I did. It wound up being inked by Ray Snyder and Craig Hamilton and colored digitally. Um, the um, the story, they cleaned it up as much as possible, Disneyfied it a little bit, not the way that I drew it, but as far as the way they told the story, really simplified it. But there are darker, like versions of it online that I think would have made, again, wouldn't have been a kid's book anymore
Mm-hmm.
as much, but that, she goes into the underworld basically.
Oh, it sounds interesting.
The land of the, and, she goes to the land of the dead and she comes back. She meets the person she wants to marry, and they marry, live happily ever after. And that's like it. In the other story, the jealous suitors kill the boyfriend she picks.
Oh wow.
She
Yeah.
uses magic she learned in the land of the dead to bring him back to life, and then he goes and hacks them to death in revenge. But they didn't go for that version of it. There's also a version in which the two of them are brother and sister, sort of. So that's also kind of weird.
There's a lot of there's old fairy tales. There's a lot of versions of them that are pretty dark, as you've said.
I actually I drew an unpublished fairy tale, full thing, for Eclipse Comics.
Uh-huh.
It's called Many Furs, Allerlehra.
Uh-huh.
And basically, or Aller, German is terrible language. Allerlehroff, I guess, um, basically means many furs.
Uh-huh.
And the word rough just means fur, basically. So it's a Cinderella story, but involves Cinderella whose father is enamored with her because when she grows up, she looks like the dearly departed mother,
Mm-hmm.
and so he wants to marry his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone's horrified. She runs away from home. She has these misadventures, and then a prince, winds up marrying her, living happily ever after. But it's kind of hard to get the stench of the father wanting to marry the
I
daughter
know
out of the
that
story.
a lot of these
It's
stories
a
have
very
like,
grim story. So the
yeah.
whole thing was penciled. They couldn't wait for paints on it, and so they basically colored on computer. I never saw what the colors looked like. They didn't get enough orders, so they never went to print.
Oh no.
So it's sitting in a drawer there. Part of me would like to, now it's only pencils, some inks, one or two panels watercolored. I
Mm-hmm.
could finish it up, make it a pet project, but I have to say it's kind of a hard thing to sell to people
Mm-hmm.
simply because of that that horrible aspect of the father. And I've seen we're talking about researching. I've researched the heck out of it. I've found 2 or 3 film versions of it,
Really
uh,
interesting.
children's book versions of it, all kinds of, well, the children's book versions of it, other than just being included in Grimm's fairy tale, were mostly German. So I can't even read them. But and actually the film versions also are in foreign languages. That I found online, and one of them I bought on eBay or something. And I had to set my DVD player to a particular way in order to even play it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's just a weird thing. And how do you go about it, to not to see, like, because that's actually a project that I would like, because it's all penciled, and
I know.
some of it, so much of it is
That's a
finished.
lot.
It's just sitting there. It's like 40 something pages, and it could
That's a
just be a
lot.
one shot, just the way it is. And the only problem is, how do you make it palatable without, how to put it, without destroying what it is? And that's the problem, is like, I have a respect for original material, and maybe it's misplaced in this particular regard, but I mean, do you make the father, do you give him an out in the sense that he is, enchanted, cursed, something, so
Well,
that,
I think the villainous of it, you probably could. I mean, that's something that you probably could kickstart. And I mean, a lot of these stories have, I mean, anyone that's ever done, I was thinking Oedipus, or, any of
mm,
those, those all
mm,
have those themes. So, and
yeah, I guess there's a way. It's just something about the
yes,
young
yes.
girl thing that just,
Yeah,
but
it does
it
have a
would,
creepiness. Yeah.
there's a creepiness to it. But here's the thing: most Cinderella stories have something like a fairy godmother or something like that, and that doesn't exist here.
Uh-huh.
And so it's almost like there's something missing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there's, I will often, like, I did Ivanhoe, for
Uh-huh.
Classics Illustrated, and for page count we had to eliminate Ulrika, and she's
Mm-hmm.
like this crazy old druid woman who
Mm-hmm.
is kept prisoner in a castle and is cursing everything as the whole castle's burning down and whatever. So, like, sometimes certain elements are just like excised, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be the case with this. But, like, I could definitely do an adaptation of it, that I put in something
Mm-hmm.
that, and make the father remorseful, even though, there's other stories. I also thought maybe I could combine it with some of the other there's like 5 Cinderella stories by the Grimms, maybe 6,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I could steal from some of the other ones and include it in there. I don't know.
I
It's a
don't know. I
lot.
think that's one of the most, like, I think there's versions of Cinderella all over the world. That's like one of the most ubiquitous stories, I think.
Yeah. But
So
it would take a lot of that. Definitely, it would definitely have to be quite the adaptation. Actually, someone who wrote a book on her, on Layra, um, maybe a decade ago, less than a decade ago, a novel in which they made her a much more self-empowered woman. But they also have her absolutely raped, which is not the case in the
hmm
original Grimm story. There's just the threat of it. She escapes.
hmm
In this novel, which is a modern novel, it actually happens, but she's still self-empowered. I've never read it. So other people are adapting the hell out of it. Maybe I should also, and say the heck with the original.
Yeah,
I've
go with
also
your own
got
project.
I've also got a Robin Hood story that I'd like to do, which is based on very early Robin Hood tale, and it's a nice little short story that, except that in it Robin Hood decapitates Sir Guy of Gisborne. So
Uh-huh.
there is decapitation that takes place, but it is the Middle Ages.
hmm
Um, it's
Hey, that
actually the
just
only,
goes with like Game of Thrones and stuff. I mean,
yes, yes.
current fantasy, there was decapitations just in the D&D movie. We just saw it.
Yeah, no, but that, I remember when I first read that, which was in the 80s, it is actually the only genuine old story that includes Guy of Gisborne. And he's not really Sir Guy of Gisborne, he's an assassin.
Uh-huh.
So, that's his original root. Again, we were talking about research. I did a lot of research on Robin Hood way back when. I'm one
hmm
of those who likes the idea of stealing from the
The
rich
old
people.
the old Howard Pyle illustrations, those were
No, no, I went to
you went
the,
back even further.
I went back to the original sources, the Little Jest of Robin Hood,
Uh-huh.
which is the original publication of it, and I went to the whatchamacallit, the London's museum, the library,
British Museum or?
the British Museum. I thought that I had another name, but anyway, I went there and I got to look at. They showed me copies of things. I couldn't, of course, see the original manuscript, but they gave me copies of things, and it was really educational. And the stuff is tied together linguistically to figure out what are the earliest stories, basically by using language. There's books authored on the subject, and just trying to figure out what were the original stories, like how did he become this like mythic hero when basically he's just a thief, basically, with a band of thugs. And so I've always liked Errol Flynn and all that kind of stuff since I was a kid. But learning about it, it's like that this one story, which is just like it's not an origin story, it's just an adventure of Robin Hood. It's a neat little thing that I think would make a nice one shot. But again,
Oh.
the amount of time it would take to do it, which is why I haven't done it. I haven't even done layouts of it or anything like that. I haven't taken it anywhere.
So what are you working on mostly these days?
Well, I only work periodically. Right now, I got a cover I'm working on, another Garbage Pail Kid cover that should have been done already. And the trading cards just came out, but I don't have anything else on my plate right now. I have commissions always, but I don't really even like doing them. Nothing against the commissioners. It's that I don't get to. When I first started doing commissions many years back, they were kind of exciting for me. It's exciting for me anymore. They're okay. They're like an exercise, but I'm not really into them. I actually prefer to just on occasion do a piece, make it available for sale. And if someone wants it, they buy it. If they don't, they don't. I'm disappointed if no one buys it, but that's not the same thing. I don't like deadlines for things that aren't for publication.
I know what
So
you mean. Yeah.
I don't like someone going, "Oh, where's my commission?" And it's like, well, I'll get to it when I get to it. While with an illustration job, they need it for publication. So
Yes.
you got to get on with it. But again, the most recent stuff was like the trading cards just came out. I haven't really posted them yet, but I will one of these days, like soon. I do want to because it actually I did 5 cards for the set. I was slated to do 9. I couldn't really get around to doing the 9. So I wound up it was crazy. I'm not blaming them because it was crazy. There are artists who do blame them for it was just nutty. Part of it was
Yes.
it was during COVID. And
Oh,
some
wow.
even the editors had trouble accessing their email accounts. It was weird. But on my end, it's mostly just family stuff and teaching, whatever got in the way. But I did 5 pieces that I like. And they did me a really nice, they gave me a really nice compliment that they took 3 of my pieces and they montaged it for the packaging.
Oh,
So
nice.
there's no extra money for that, but it's still really nice to be highlighted that way. So my work is the work that's featured on the box and on the wrappers, which is really nice, so I really got a kick out of that. So I do want to show it on my Facebook page and on Instagram. I just haven't gone around to scan because I want to scan the box image to kind of show it off, but I just haven't had the time. One of the things which I post, which I don't know that you've noticed, but I for a friend of mine, a retired, thanks to COVID, not COVID that he got, but because of he's older, so he couldn't do remote teaching. A retired artist, illustrator, teacher, friend of mine named Tony Kakinos. When he retired, he left a lot of stuff at the college. He's a sketchaholic. He is a sketcher every day. Like
Excellent.
I've been posting his stuff. I created a Facebook page for
Oh,
his
yes,
family.
I think I did see some of that, and it was very nice.
He's on Instagram, and I've been posting sketch pages by him for the past few days, actually.
I'll have to go back and look at those.
Yeah, on Instagram, the art of Tony Kakinos. These are 8.5 by 11 little pen drawings, one after another. After he's just filling these sheets, and they're marvelous.
Wow.
He is inspirational. And he's 95 years old. Well,
wow.
He turns 95 this year.
I hope I'm still sketching at 95.
I just saw on Stephen Colbert last night, I think his name is John Kander, with Luis Manuel Miranda.
Oh, yes.
They just have the New York Broadway show. John Kander, and he wrote it recently. John Kander, who wrote the music for the original New York movie, and he also wrote the score for Chicago and a lot of other Broadway shows. He's 96, and he's still creating. He's still creating at 96.
That's very impressive.
My buddy's strong on 95, and yes, just as you said, I hope I'm still being creative at that age. That would
Well,
be marvelous.
well, we should wrap it up. What are your socials if people want to follow you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I think I'm not sure if it's just Ray Lago. It might be Facebook, Ray Lago. And on Instagram, I think it's Ray Lago Art, I think.
Okay.
I don't really know. I know it sounds funny, but I really don't know because it's not like something that I need to put out there, so.
Yeah, I'll definitely put the links when I post it. And thanks so much for joining me. It's been great hearing about your career, and now we're finally being joined by the cat. She's like decided she wants to be part of it.
Yeah, my cats have actually kind of like come around and hop up there, whatever, but they haven't tried to get on my lap. I have one of the cats who occasionally tries to draw. Yeah, I'm on a drawing table here. Occasionally wants to hop up on the drawing table, which is always a problem. But she hasn't done that either. I have two females. So I've had them for a little over a year. They're terrific. They're great. Cats are great company.
Well, thanks so much for joining me.
Sure, no, pleasure to finally meet you, like you said before, kind of face to face, after all this time. No, my pleasure.